Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. The reason that you have 3 podcast hosts is so that you can just exchange one each week and you just tap in one on, one off.
Yeah.
And
it's like an Amazon return, you know what I mean? Like you just put it back in the box, send it off, no worries. You know?
First one's free, Jeff.
That's it. And that's how it is with Tom and me. We just switch out everywhere. One day, and I promise this to the listeners, there will be a show where all 3 of us will be on it.
Oh, I thought you were going to say where it's just you and Tom. And
no. Well, we have had one or two of them where you've been
in 12 or so years.
12 or so years. Tom and I just sitting there with like all the buttons going, I think we're just going to turn the gain up or something.
Not enough gain. Adam is obsessed with the gain. Can I just say, anytime that we're like early days when we were just figuring out how to do this, and I say early days up until like maybe 3 weeks ago, but every time that there's a problem with the sound, I'm like, that's that weird interference coming in again. I don't know what it is. And Adam's like, could it be, hear me out, the gain? I'm like, it's not the gain. Shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about.
It's to do with the power levels. You get too much gain. You get funny sound.
It's over 9,000.
It's over 9,000.
And speaking of power levels that have increased, Peter Dutton has ascended, has risen from a phoenix, as a phoenix from the ashes, and is tasked with the Herculean task of reassembling a shattered Liberal Party.
Can we play Duel of Fates right now? That's all I want to play. That's the choir bit that I can't sing, which probably Discord will cut out if I try and sing it. Yeah, no, it's gone. Discord's like, no, we're not hearing that. Just have silence.
Discord does us so many favors, I think, when we're having chats. So to Discord's like, sweetheart, no.
You sound like shit. We're not putting that up.
I'm not going to let you do that to yourself. So Peter Dutton, Lord of Darkness, has ascended to his dark throne in Mordor. Sorry, the head of the Liberal National Party, and yeah, completely unsurprisingly. But I'm a little bit sick of the coverage that he's getting already. It's like, Dutton, a hero in the wilderness, needs to assemble the shattered Liberal Party. It's just everyone is so fucking obsessed with the Liberals and what the Liberals are doing and how the Liberals are going to rise and ascend back to power. It's just like, guys, we don't care about these people.
Like trying to assemble the Fellowship of the Ring to go back into...
Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make.
It's not the same reference.
It's a different reference. We'll take it. That's a different one. That's okay.
It's on theme.
And my axe. Yeah. There we go. That's the Lord of the Rings. And my axe and my bow.
So Peter, deputy is Susan Ley.
Susan Ley.
So they've got a woman in there. Dear God, look how.
Whoa!
Look at the change, George.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were dealing with a bunch of lefty fucking progressives. Look, there's a woman. I got a woman. Yeah, I think I said this last week on the podcast, where someone said if Susan Ley is the answer, what the hell was the question? Yeah, you really, and it's funny, like already the media and Peter Dutton have gone just directly on the attack. It's like the cabinet was just sworn in this week and they're just like, how is, Labor going to deal with this debt and deficit bomb that we created over the last 9 years? Yeah, okay, here's a story from The Australian. We need to hold Labor to account on the debt and deficit disaster. It's time to stop creeping middle-age spread and stop the creeping middle-age spread and stop spending more than we earn by getting the budget under control. That's a commentary from The Australian today, when the Labor Party has been in power for a grand total of 12 days.
Oh my God.
It wasn't even certain up until like 2 or 3 days ago whether they even had 77 seats or not. Like
if hypothetically, if the Liberals had won, they would not be saying that. They'd be like, spend away.
Do what you got to do.
Whoever was there.
Josh, we saved the furniture. Now it's time to spend big because those Labor cucks don't want you to.
In the Liberal cinematic universe, where the multiverse, where Labor shut the bed. It's funny. I was looking at this article here, and you look at you might say a young.
Can I just say the Labor cinematic universe not as good as the Marvel cinematic universe? It's definitely more on the DC end of the spectrum. The Labor cinematic universe is just like it has so much potential, but it ends up being inevitably disappointing every time round.
They always get like a second director to come back in and rewrite the end, and
it's like, do I want to see Aquaman? I don't. I think it could be fun, but I think it's mostly just going to be disappointing, right? Like,
do I want to see the Rudd trilogy, or do I just want to see like just the one? You know,
maybe I should just rewatch Paul Keating videos on YouTube.
That's
what I really
what
need.
I did the other night, to be honest. But anyway, he had a good way about him in the what they call it, question time. Anyway, so Peter Dutton in this image, and it's kind of, I might just share it for the people who are watching the stream, which is probably no one at this point, but let's put it on anyway. If I can find the bloody
Australian politics streams are all the rage. Okay.
Oh, they are. Like we are a trendsetter.
Trendsetter. It's a fashion risk that we're taking. Hang on, let's watch this. Watch the stream. Let's look at this.
Yeah, it's just an image of Peter Dutton who looked, and you can Google it. Just Google, for the listeners, Google Peter Dutton 2001, which is when he came into power. And you can see him standing behind John Howard, who looks about 90 years old there. He is about 90 years old now. John Howard has always been 90 years old. And he still has hair. His face is a bit longer, and he kind of looks still dead in the eyes, though.
I was going to say,
that's the bit that I don't.
He does kind of look a bit, zombified. You certainly wouldn't look at him and think, there's a bright young fellow on his way to being leader of the opposition. And yet, here we are.
And if I scroll up the top of this page here, and we go to...
Maybe he's deep in thought, Adam. Maybe we're not giving him enough credit.
But look at... maybe he's actually got a medical condition. I shouldn't be too disparaging about this and his loss of hair. So I shouldn't be like, there might actually be something that's, and if it is, like, I'm sorry to hear that. But
I'm sorry to hear the thing that I just made up. Okay.
Well, he might, but like, even his eyebrows are kind of not there anymore.
I don't
Do you know what I mean?
Peter Dutton's physical characteristics are the least objectionable thing about him. It's more the things he believes and says that are the problem. Like, yes, he does happen to look like Voldemort. That's neither here nor there. The fact that he behaves like the Lord of Darkness is more the concerning part in my
This is my point, is that since 2001, obviously he's gone through, and this is what he said in his press conference. They were basically asking him, like, why haven't we seen the other side of Peter Dutton, basically?
Why are you the way that you are?
And he's like, well, I've had a lot of tough jobs, I was defense minister, I was immigration minister, and you can just see over time that his I'll stop sharing now. Like it's taken a toll on his physical appearance.
No, I think that's what happens when you split your soul into 8 pieces and store them in inanimate objects in order to attain eternal life. That's generally what happens.
Yes, potentially. But it is one of these things. It's like, okay, well now, and I know you guys were discussing this on the show last week about whether or not it matters, whether or not there is still a moderate faction of the Liberal Party.
Which, by the way, there isn't.
There isn't. A lot of quote unquote moderates have been left. I guess the question for me is, will this push them
cordially invited to leave by the voters?
The question I have is whether or not having, even though Dutton's leader and he's pretty, Mark McGowan described him as an extremist. So whether or not the election result, whether they'll listen to the voters and go, oh, actually, you know what, like maybe we should have some more women in cabinet and maybe we should do something about the environment and maybe we do need to probably work out who we're pre-selecting and be a bit more values-led. And anyway, so if they do go through all that, will they listen to that and will they be able to change? Or will it go like it does in the US, where they just go further to the right and then you end up with like the Tea Party, and then they just get better at marketing themselves, and then they actually grab a hold of the narrative with that far right bent and use it to push the whole pendulum further right? Like, it could go either way. They may listen.
Can I place
change.
Can I place a bet?
Yeah, I think it's. I don't have you guys were very positive about it not mattering, and I do think it is going to matter.
They're going to swing. They're going to swing further to the right. The commentary he's making already is like, yeah, I mean, climate change is real and all, but we need to do it in a measured way and looking after fossil fuel industries and none of this namby-pamby woke nonsense bullshit. We're not going to have what was he got in trouble for something a couple of months ago because they said the Australian Defence Force was too woke because there was a morning tea that they had in favour of LGBTQI.
Years ago, but yeah.
Whenever that was. But it's he is not the Malcolm Turnbull, Goldman Sachs corporate, centre-right guy. That's not Peter Dutton, right? So that's just not in his DNA. And now, in all fairness, his DNA is 86% reptilian, so that's not really a fair comparison to make. But I don't see him swinging to the cuddly centre, shall we say.
And that's just to pick up what you guys were saying last week, where you were like, "Oh, does it really matter? If
he's in the wilderness,
who cares?" But I think it does because I think the Murdoch media.
Why do you think it matters? Tell me.
Well, I think that in combination with the Murdoch media and other far right outlets, as it did in the US, it ended up going, and because there's going to be a lot of pain over the next couple of years. There's going to be interest rate rises. There's going to be probably a housing crunch. There's going to be cost of living issues, gas prices and electricity prices going through the roof, fuel prices going through the roof. It's going to be a shit couple of years. Labor may not survive that just on that alone. But the issue being is that in that angst, all they have to do, and this is what happened. Remember back in the Gillard years, all they have to do, they don't even have to propose any policies. They just have to negatively campaign, chip away, get the flames going of resentment towards the Labor government, and also say a bunch of weird racist crap, people will buy into it because they will be angry.
I think you're right.
And that's exactly what happened in the US, and it's going to happen here. And this is why I didn't want Dutton as leader.
Yeah, no,
I think it's not a good idea.
Dutton's a piece of shit. I would rather he not be in than be in. I would rather that there was someone a little bit more sensible at the helm. Of the two of them, someone like Josh Frydenberg seems less like a supervillain. But that's where the party is, and I think as long as they're not in power, it's not a problem. But the problem is that when you go to a head-to-head contest, there is a non-zero chance that doing what the Liberal Party does best, which is sniping from the opposition and tearing down, as you say, aided by the Murdoch propaganda machine. Yeah, they were very effective opposition in that they didn't really stand for anything. They were just very good attack dogs. Tony Abbott was a perfect example of that. Someone who's just really fucking good at attacking over and over again, even if the attacks themselves don't have much substance and they as a party are not necessarily fit and ready to govern once they take power. They really are the dog that caught the car.
they are. They were. Yeah, they 100% were.
Tony Abbott was the dog that caught the car. He was really good at barking, and then he caught the car. It was like, great, now you're driving the car, dog. And he's like, I guess I'll eat an onion. It was really...
Meanwhile, Peter Credlin's just in the back going, holy shit.
Yeah, exactly. It is dangerous having someone like Dutton as the opposition leader, especially given, there's all these things that keep popping up in the news, which are basically the thrust of all the news articles this week are like, hey, remember when Dutton did this fucked up thing? Remember when he refused to attend the apology to the stolen generation? Remember when he, did this, had a go at the woke ADF over this Tea Party? Remember when he, all these, abhorrent, terrible right-wing shitbag positions that he does hold. That seems to be the flavour of the articles.
His excuse was, well, I've held a lot of difficult positions, and it's very hard for you just, everyone was asking me questions about the Biloela family, Sri Lankan, ex-Sri Lankan family. And he's like, well, I gave lots of, special permissions, when I was minister, but no one talks about those. It was just everyone just focuses on this one. I was like, yeah, because it was a pretty fucked up case.
Yeah. It was newsworthy, and that's why it was in the news.
Yeah.
And yeah, it turns out like Jim Chalmers on like day 3 was like, hey, let's send him back. Turns out there's not so much bureaucracy and like things that the federal government is powerless against, to navigate. Turns out you could just make a decision and send him back. And then they did.
Give them a temporary visa and away they go.
And then sort it out. Yeah, exactly. So I don't, whatever the question was, I don't think Peter Dutton is the answer. And yet there is a part of me that thinks like perhaps he is so objectionable personally to the electorate that if he were to run, he would hopefully lose pretty substantially just because he is kind of a grotesque character. But who knows? There's a chance he could win. There's a chance, as you say, after 3 years of attack ads and Murdoch propaganda, is it definitely going to be a trouncing? I don't know. Possibly
I feel
not.
like Labor have got a real challenge ahead of them.
Yeah, as you say, like Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. And like, as you say, we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us in the economy. Like, this week, basically the Labor government was flagging, hey, gas prices are going to be real fucked and it's going to be a problem for a while. And we haven't really got a good response to it. And it's like...
was like, was it Chris Bowen? I can't remember. Someone was like, yeah, we can't... Well, there's a bunch of triggers we can pull, but they won't take effect until 12 months from now.
Yeah, so there's this program that they can institute, which would basically, as I understand it, keep a bunch of gas production onshore here in Australia. So the gas production has gone up and up and up over the last 10, 15 years, but it's all going into exports, right? There's this big burgeoning export market. And the problem is these are global commodities, right? So if everyone's not buying Russian gas and that makes the price of everyone else's gas go up, then they're incentivized to sell it like the price we pay for gas here is the same as the price you pay for gas over in Europe. It's a gas price. It's an international commodity. So if everyone else is paying more, then we end up paying more as well, even though we create much more than we use. But yeah, David,
that was a lot of criticism from Turnbull years almost, was that we've got this surplus of gas, but we don't. But there are gas shortages in parts of Australia because we're shit at like getting it around the country. And to give the Morrison government some credit, part of their energy policy was that they wanted to revamp the gas sector as a segue to hydrogen. Whether or not that ends up happening,
they wanted a gas. They filled up a panel of independent experts with people from the gas sector, and guess what they suggested? A gas-led recovery out of COVID. What is a Kel fucking surprise? Yeah, I filled it with a bunch of chocolate executives, and they think it's a Mars bar-led recovery. So what a fucking shock that was. So there are obviously anyway. So this mechanism would basically say like, yes, we would need to keep a certain portion of this gas that we create here in Australia onshore for like strategic purposes. But yeah, you're right. It wouldn't really come into effect in any meaningful way until January of next year. So there's sort of, and I think they'll do what governments always do in this instance when there's a shortage, is they'll go, oh, we'll do a really means-tested rebate for pensioners and poor people, and it'll kind of fudge things a little bit around the edges, but not really do too much. That's all they can do. Is pull a lever and make the cash money. That's all governments, I feel like. That's the first port of call whenever there's a policy issue, is let's find out a way to give a subsidy to some targeted group, which may help the most vulnerable to some degree. But when we're heading into a pretty chilly looking winter, it doesn't seem like it's the best of all available worlds.
I turn my heater down on that note. I'll just turn that
on that note.
So that's the Liberal Party. Peter Dutton, Susan Ley, I guess they've rearranged their shadow ministry. You had something to say, sorry, what were you?
Yeah, no, just on the gas thing, David Littleproud has been elected to head of the Nationals just recently. Yeah. And I love Barnaby's response. Barnaby Joyce was like, I bet you think I'm upset about this. Not fucking so. I was going to go anyway. I fucking loved getting turfed out of my job that I just got into several months ago. Just got back. I loved it.
Can you believe that response? It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of like some school.
You can't fire me. I quit.
Like, yeah, literally. Like, oh, I didn't like that's so last week anyway. Like, I'm not going to wear that. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it is that is such. Anyway, good that he's in the backbench.
I
Thank
guess,
God
but
for that.
but Littleproud was so like his interview on Insiders this morning was just fucking hilarious. Where he goes, "Oh yeah, well, Labor can't fix this. Fucking Labor." I was like, guys, they've been in power 12 days. Just like everyone, just chill. So some of the ministers only got sworn in this week, so like everyone just take a breath. But yeah, he was saying, it's because they don't have ties to the gas industry. They're not going to be able to sort it out. Whereas, like, if it was us, we just pick up the phone. I was like, hang on, are you saying that the way to solve this crisis is to be in bed with the fossil fuel extraction industry? That's your solve to this, is just pick up the phone and make more gas? And they said that David Spears is like, how would that solve the problem? And he goes, oh, Angus, as in Angus Taylor. Angus reckons there's heaps of capacity. It's like, but we've talked to the gas providers and they said there's not extra capacity. And he goes, nah, Angus reckons there is. had a word to me, mate.
Taylor.
Angus, just pick up the phone.
Angus Taylor.
Gussie,
By the way,
Gussie reckons she's all right. She's all good,
what was his
mate.
portfolio? It was
I think it was energy
and environment.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? So they had, I think, from the Liberals had energy and the environment as the one ministry,
which just tells you
interesting.
Here we go, Minister for Industry, Energy, and Emissions Reduction.
Yeah, right. So, like, duh, those things don't go together necessarily. Some of them do, but some of them don't. So, interesting. Labor have split it. So they now have a dedicated resources minister, which is Madeleine King, and they have a climate change and energy minister, which is Chris Bowen. So, like, I don't know.
Rather than having a fossil fuels minister, you think that's a better way of doing things? Maybe?
Actually, I misread that. So climate change and energy is still in the same sort of section there. So I tell a lie, but whether or not, Chris Bowen can pull a rabbit out of his hat with any of this, I'm not exactly sure. I think we're going to be struggling for a little bit. Although, as we were saying in our group chat the other day, I'm kind of like, just let a little apocalypse happen. Let's just let a little. Let's just have a little apocalypse.
Just a quick one.
Just get one out and just have a slight apocalypse.
I like to think that I would do pretty good in an apocalypse situation.
No, I think we'd both be pretty fucked.
I reckon.
Can you light a fire?
Yeah, with some. Yeah. With a lighter.
Yeah. You can't fucking alone that shit with two sticks.
No, I can't do the Bear Grylls thing with two sticks. No, I can't do that. But I reckon I could, I could find myself in a position where I've seen so much death and destruction, and it's just like, that's how it is. Sometimes you just got to kill a homeless person and steal his can of food. Like, I think I could get there.
Yeah. Can you grow tomatoes?
I can. Tomatoes are probably not the most calorie dense food. You get one crop every 8 months. It's probably not the best way of sort of sustaining yourself over the cold winter months.
What else you got in your little veggie garden? You got any potatoes?
Yeah, it's like, well, it has been 12 months, but at least we can do a caprese salad once. There we go. I haven't got any cheese. I haven't got any buffalo cheese, but
no,
we do have some thinly sliced tomatoes and salt. So there you go. Don't eat it all at once, folks.
So Nationals. Littleproud is the Nationals leader. I don't know who the deputy was. Do they have a deputy person?
I'm sure they do.
Oh yeah, sorry, Senator Perrin Davey is the new National deputy leader. And they're not going to abandon net zero climate commitment, but they're sort of flogging off the same bullshit about, we've got to be responsible about it. We can't be too fucking crazy.
He was describing himself as a centrist today, which I'm like, I don't know what you think you're the center of, but it's not politics.
He's more center than Barnaby Joyce, or even who was the other one before
Michael
him?
McCormick.
Michael McCormick. I think he's more center than those guys. But time will tell, I guess, in terms of, if they can see an opening somewhere where they can wedge an issue, I'm sure it doesn't matter whether they're left, right, or upside down, they will wedge it for the convenience of potentially getting it to power.
Like so many potato chips, they are full of wedges.
Is it a good time to quickly talk about the Labor ministry. I mean, it's kind of, I've got it
Sure.
up here in front of me, and I didn't actually share it with everyone, but I'll just pop it in the thing here for George. I mean, it's not really hugely newsworthy, but in the sense that, like, you don't necessarily know who all these people are. But what was interesting was that there's a lot of people who are returning to ministries that they previously held last time around. So in terms of the level of experience in the cabinet, it's actually quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a lot of people here who are seasoned campaigners, have been in Parliament for a long time, and, you know, they should know, in theory, what they're doing.
And that's what voters want, Adam, is more status quo. Just business as usual.
Business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
And like the thing that I noticed that they went hard on really early was that Penny Wong obviously was around, you know, doing the Pacific tour this week. While our foreign minister's off touring the Pacific at the same time, China's foreign minister's off touring the Pacific, and they're sort of dancing around each other, like jumping from island to island. And curiously enough, this is not in the rundown, but the Chinese Pacific deal, where they wanted to, I think, get 10 island nations together to sort of have a bilateral agreement on security, trade, and God knows what else, that fell through. So it is interesting to see that the primary focus from a foreign policy perspective is to do exactly what the Liberals hadn't done for like 6 months, which is to get out there and actually like network.
Just press the flesh.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, did I send that? Did I put that in there? I did. So yeah, I mean, Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney will be taking on the stuff for the Uluru Statement to the Heart and changing the constitution that they've flagged.
And that's the first Indigenous person to hold that role, if I'm not mistaken.
For Indigenous Australians, I think there has been another one who was first Indigenous woman, I believe.
Indigenous woman, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's been a previous Indigenous person doing it, but first Indigenous woman. There's also first Islamic minister as well. So Ed Husick as a Minister for Industry and Science. Notice that we, as a counterpoint, when the Liberals first announced their ministry in 2014, they didn't have a science minister. Just didn't have one.
That tracks.
And interestingly, Tony Burke is, I think that's not technically a minister, but he's the special envoy for the arts, which is nice as well, because I don't know if arts necessarily had a representation under the previous Liberal government.
I believe it's also the Labor front bench also sets a record for the number of females in a cabinet as well. Yeah. So the most diverse cabinet in Australian history, which admittedly is not a high bar to clear. Previous cabinets have included white men and white men. So it is nice to see some people who are not white men in those positions of power. And who knows, Adam, maybe they might bring a slightly different perspective. Maybe there might be some value into other people that are not white men having a say. Who knows if there's any possibility of that actually transpiring. But believe it or not, different perspectives might be more good.
Might change some things, yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
It isn't quite 50-50, I think, with the whole ministry, but it's better than what it was, and it's an improvement. So yay, positive stuff.
I've never been one of those people that thinks like, unless someone's ministry or someone's cabinet is perfectly reflective of percentage point of the society at large, if that's not the case, then there must be something racist going on. But yeah, I think it is undoubtedly a good sign that the cabinet is more diverse. And I think it's a strength when making decisions that impact different communities to have people that are in those communities having a voice at the table, obviously a good thing. So
100%. And I think Ed Husick said as much as well when he, was sworn in. He said, for people who think like it's just a token gesture, but he goes, it does matter.
Yeah.
Because it is about creating a voice, and I think, not only that, but the experience of a lot of these people that they've put into positions will benefit Australians as a whole. It's not a bunch of ideologues necessarily. They're people that are quite rational and that have got an education and are experienced in the fields that they're talking about. So I'm pretty excited for that.
and actually quite like comparatively young compared to previous previous cabinets as well. Like I noticed, during the swearing in ceremonies for a lot of the Labor ministers, a lot of them had their young kids there, like toddlers and little babies, and kids that are sort of under 5 that are sort of running around. And I was just like, oh yeah, you don't really think about that aspect of it as well, that these a lot of these people are parents and they have families and they're I think that's it can only result in a cabinet that's a little bit more, I don't know, sprightly, a little bit more responsive, a little bit more agile maybe.
I think they're going to potentially be, hopefully, there's not as much ego this time around, and there's a bit more sort of practicality on, wanting to make a difference and actually change things. So
with that said, apparently Tanya Plibersek has been given the environment portfolio, which is not what she held previously. And there has been some, sort of rumor, sort of talk about how the reason that's been done is because she was more of a Bill Shorten backer last time round. And, people seem to like her. And so, the Albanese faction want to sort of put her in a position where she's not in front of the cameras a lot, like she was with education. They're not a lot less like hugging children and kissing babies, and a lot more like dealing with hard problems alone in a room somewhere, not in front of the cameras.
Although you'd argue that environment, given that
it's very important. It's a hugely important portfolio, but it's not going to get the same level of camera time as
with climate change and the thrust behind that, and getting to the net zero and all that kind of stuff. I would have thought environment would be.
There's a separate minister for issues to do with climate change.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't know. I mean, the Murray-Darling's still broken. Like there's a lot of stuff that still needs fixing, I guess, with that.
The thing with the environment is you don't get credit for doing a good job. No one goes like, oh, you fixed the Murray-Darling. No one, even people didn't really care when, Barnaby Joyce and the Nationals broke the Murray-Darling. So I very much, I don't think they're going to get a lot of credit for fixing it up either. So,
the other thing that Labor, I'm just segueing through our articles here, so forgive me, but
that's all right. We're professional as fuck. We're just
getting into it, going from one thing to the other. But the other thing that Labor have done, which of course was one thing they campaigned on the latter part of the election campaign, was that they have formally submitted to the Fair Work Commission for a minimum pay rise of at least 5.1% for those on the minimum wage.
Now, interestingly, the latest projections on the inflation rate for the year put it probably closer at 6 or 6.4% for the year annualized. So 5.1%. Say the inflation rate ends up being 6.4%, and an increase of 5.1% would actually be a slight step backwards for those people. And they've clarified that it's just a one-off, that this is not like a thing that they're doing, that it's always going to match inflation. So
those expectations,
Yeah, I don't want you guys thinking things are going to be too good under Labor, because we're still.
Of course, it's only for the lowest paid workers. We're talking like. It's the impact this will have is pretty much negligible to the broader economy.
Labor going slightly less backwards.
There's a graph here which talks about minimum wage increases versus consumer price inflation. And it's not great. I'm just looking at consumer price in March. So yeah, I mean, in 2020, CPI was higher than wage growth.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this year it will be. Generally speaking, minimum wages are generally more than, looking at this graph, than CPI. But yeah, over the last 2021, it was not as bad, but 2020, and I think this year it will be slightly out of whack.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But
again, it doesn't really change anything in the economy. It's like a fraction of a percentage of the workforce we're talking about.
It is negligible in terms of the difference that it makes. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a real opportunity to like sort of differentiate from the Liberals and say like, yeah, we're the party of the workers. And if, you're a worker, then things are going to be better off under us. But it's like the messaging on it has been kind of a bit weak sauce for my liking. It's like, yeah, slightly less backwards than the other guy. And I don't know how inspiring that is. And again, it's sort of like it's up to the Fair Work Commission. Like they've made a submission that of 5.1%, but then the Fair Work Commission can, again, just turn around and recommend whatever the fuck it is they were going to recommend in the first place. So it may not make a difference in the end at all. Yeah, it's kind of hard to...
Yeah. I mean, they've done the thing they said they would do. So there's election promise 1 ticked off.
I mean, kind of. I wonder how, to the extent that was a full election promise and how much of that was just Anthony Albanese just kind of like spitballing on the run. Conference. Well, yeah, because they sort of put it to him. They're like, oh, the inflation's 5.1%. Like, are you going to make a recommendation that pay like minimum wages should keep pace with that? And he went, yes.
Yep. And then he had to like backtrack for the next week.
And they're like, is that an election promise? And he goes, I guess it is now.
Well, the Labor strategists in the campaign HQ were just like, fuck.
Promises given, promises kept. Sort of. Promises given, promises almost kept.
I mean, it's going to be an interesting time because, obviously unemployment's coming down. So we're sort of in a 4% somewhere now for unemployment and 4 point something.
5 point, as Anthony Albanese said. 5 point bleh, bleh. Bleh, I forgot.
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Bleh.
But, at the same time, yeah, inflation is going up. So, there is amongst our parents' generation, who are the ones who are, sort of were going through, buying houses and starting families in the 80s and the 70s, in the late 70s, where they look at rising inflation and they literally have panic attacks because it used to be like 17%. It'll be really interesting to see how high that gets and as to how many people of that age just lose their minds.
Well, I don't think we can. Like, I think that the era of those like record high interest rates of like 17% or whatever, I just don't think they could possibly exist in the current high debt environment that we live in. If you have interest rates of 17%, there is no one with a mortgage that will be able to afford to make those repayments. Like, it would just break the economy if that's what happens. So even you think about it, if you've borrowed $900,000 for a home, that interest rate of 5% even is like, that's serious money. That's most people's like monthly paycheck. So I don't think we're entering that sort of Paul Volcker, super high interest rates to fight inflation sort of period like the US had in the 70s. But like, yeah, it's certainly
if we get to 7, if we get to inflation's going to be going up, but if we get to a 7% interest rate point, it's somewhere around there.
I don't see how we could. I think so many.
Will die.
It would cause a housing crisis because no one could afford. Like a lot of people, even people now, they're like the housing prices have slowed in the last month or so because of rising interest rates. I'm like, there was one interest rate rise. My house, my mortgage has gone from like 2.07% to 2.32%. So if that's what's making people freak out, like, you got another thing coming because if it
also scares investors as well. Like the share market, tech stocks, for instance. I mean, it's not completely related, but tech stocks,
fairly related,
have been kind of like in the toilet the last.
The commentary around that is like, if interest rates rise, then it's discounting future earnings, and these tech companies in particular count on big future earnings to justify their current stock prices. Yeah. So it's like, we're not a profitable company now, but in 20 years, if we keep doubling it, doubling every 5 years or whatever they're promising or projecting, then we'll be worth a lot later. And that's why people pay a lot of money now for those tech stocks. So if those interest rates rise, basically the value of that future money gets discounted, gets much less, becomes much less. So those tech stocks that's the commentary around it. That's why those tech stocks have taken a big hit. But like, it is such a small interest rate rise. I can't imagine many investors being like, I don't remember when they lowered the interest rate by 0.25% down to this. that everyone was going like, oh, it's a party, it's a free for all. Like,
buy $1 million house.
Yeah, like a year ago, that was just the interest rate that we've risen back up to. So it's not as though, they kept cutting interest, cutting them. No one said like, oh, this is amazing, like high-fiving a million angels. Now I have $1 million in my pocket. But
it's probably a good thing. Like I was talking, I work in property, so I mean, it's funny. I kind of want the market to crash, but I'm also aware that will destroy my career.
So we don't want it to crash. We want a nice soft landing, and this is the word,
a tapering.
What we want is a small correction in the housing market, a very light feather duster correction.
I'd like it to correct though that way for a significant portion of time. So, a 3-bedroom house doesn't cost $900,000 in the suburbs of Melbourne.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Wish away, my friend.
Like, the problem is that, a lot of people just think, they're eligible. This is the other thing. People go to auctions thinking they're eligible for, $1 million and whatever they want. But they're not really. And like, there are so many things that go into loan calculations that people just don't really trigger. So quite often what's happening is people are overextending on their mortgages anyway, just through ignorance, let alone the fact that interest rates are going up. Well, but the funny thing is that like, you may get with interest rate rises, if they're going up, say every 6 months, you may get pre-approved, say in June, then it might expire and you go back for another pre-approval in August. But by that point, interest rates are about to go up. Or the bank may be preempting an interest rate rise, and so they just decrease your borrowing capacity by $200,000 or whatever it may be. So the house you wanted or you've signed a contract for, you can no longer get the loan for.
The prices are so high that people are already extending themselves at the current rates. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that if the interest rates go up to 3%, 4%, I think there's going to be a lot of people that will have to sell their homes because they can't afford to make the repayments. So,
or potentially bring prices right down because if everyone's selling. Yeah,
it's what they call distressed selling, right? Is if you have to because you can't afford to. So it doesn't even take that many interest rate rises to get to. If you're struggling to make your repayments now at 2.35%, like what's it going to be at 3%, 4%? And I saw this woman on the news saying like, what people should really do is calculate what their mortgage repayments would be at like 3 or 4%, like just sort of stay wary and, just be careful sort of thing. And I was kind of like, you guys didn't do that
already?
You guys didn't. I've got a whole color coded fucking flow chart. I'm not even joking. I've got a whole
statistical analysis, motherfucker.
Excel spreadsheet, which is conditional.
You need to agree.
Conditional formatting. And it's got borrowing amounts on the left-hand side. So like 600, 650, 700, 750 on the left-hand side. Yeah. And then on the x-axis, it's got 3.25, 3.5, 4%, 4.25. And it goes across. And it's like, okay, so if we borrow 500 at 4%, what does our monthly repayment look like? All the way down to, and it's like, we know we can handle if we borrow, I don't know, 600 and it's like 4%, our repayment's going to be this, we can handle that. And when the bank does their assessments, they are assessing like, what is your ability to repay this loan if the interest rate is 5%? That's so you should theoretically be able to make the repayments even if interest rates rise. And historically, interest rates do hover around 5%. So you should be prepared for a return to that at some point. But a lot of people are just like, the bank gave me the money, it was good, and now I own a home. And it's like...
and the thing is, like, and this is what the mortgage broke, and like another lady as well, she's the other work the other day, she was like, I refinanced, and then I went and I bought a new car, and then I've got all this money for landscaping, and now I'm just going to landscape my house. I'm like, great. So you've just overextended yourself by another $100,000.
Cool.
And like at the moment, her repayments are the same because she refinanced, got a better rate and all that kind of stuff. But interest rates will go up. And so your overall repayments will increase over time.
No, Adam, it's free money. It's a credit card. It's a credit card that you never have to pay. The bill will never come due.
One of the guys was saying, in this thing I was doing the other day, he's like, well, yeah, like we'll tell people, this is sort of, how much you need to sort of save, and people just go and do stupid shit. They just go and buy dogs. They'll just go and buy a new car. They'll just go and go on holiday and spend $20,000, and that impacts whether if it's an assessment, it impacts the bank's loan assessment. If it's real life, then it affects your ability to fucking pay the fee.
Yeah, no, I think the assessments that you do or that they give you when you're putting in for a home loan are just like, they're based on like the platonic ideal of a household budget. they're like, yeah, I my expenses are $2,000 a month and I eat beans and rice and I don't do anything. It's like compared to actual life, oh, your dog needs surgery. It's going to cost $9,000. Like, yeah, didn't prepare for that in the monthly budget. Like,
even now, like we said, I will save some money and we'll eat the food that we've got in the fridge. We've still got food in the fridge. And then literally before this show started, my sister was like, hey, you guys want to go for tacos? And like, no, we're going for tacos.
Boy, do
at
I.
An expensive Mexican restaurant, which is a fucking contradiction in itself. How is Mexican expensive? I don't know. But anyway.
Well, yeah, you would think it's certainly not expensive to the Mexicans in Mexico.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like the whole idea of like what your projected budget is versus your actual budget is always different, right? There's always a difference there. And I don't think a lot of people in Australia are going to have a really rude awakening. If interest rates hit 4 or 5%, it's going to fuck up people's lives. And I don't think they're ready for that.
Labor's fault. It'll be Labor's debt and deficit disaster, George.
The thing is it will be. It may not be their fault, but they're the ones in power. And the people,
to deal with it.
Voters really fucking hate whoever's in charge whenever shit in the economy is fucked up. So yeah, it might be the case that in 3 years we're looking at a situation where interest rates are sky high, things have gone to shit, mainly because of the financial decisions that have been made by the previous LNP government. And now the chickens have come home to roost during Labor's term. they're the ones that are holding the hot potato when everything goes to shit, just because of how things have trended over the last 9 years. And then maybe they turn around and vote Dutton in because, because he's got a nice scalp. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed.
He's got a lovely scalp.
Anyway, so I don't know how we got.
Let's talk about all the shit fucked stuff now.
What?
Let's talk about like all the light and fluffy stuff. Let's get sick. I'm sick of talking about the economy.
Here we go.
Let's talk about
Shake it out.
Shine and Broader.
Okay.
You got some nice, tidy, like some sweet like morsels.
Some sweet treats.
Consume. Yeah, exactly. So starting off, Karen Hayes. You're like, who the fuck is Karen Hayes? And I don't really care who Karen Hayes is either. But that being said, she was the CEO of Guide Dogs Victoria,
and now
who we talked about previously.
She's on the queue at the Dole. You remember
so
when we first brought this story? So Karen Hayes was the chief executive officer of Guide Dogs Victoria, and there were pamphlets going around of her talking about how she was supporting Josh Frydenberg because he'd given them a bunch of money. And then she was immediately stood down by the board of Guide Dogs Victoria. And I mentioned the story saying and they said they were pending an investigation, right? And I said, I've concluded my investigation and it seems like I know before Karen knows that Karen has lost her job. And sure enough, Karen has lost her job. The investigation has been concluded.
She wasn't fired.
No.
She resigned, George.
She resigned in a hail of bullets. Resigned off from a great height.
You would suggest that the position was untenable given the coverage. Of course, it makes it even worse that Josh Frydenberg lost his seat as well, which is a good start. George has just left me, by the way, for the listeners. He's just ran out of the room, and I am talking now to an empty chair.
Some water, relax.
It's just getting some water, okay? So, yeah. So Hayes, though, interestingly enough, she had led the organisation for 10 years. So it wasn't like she was just some sort of, new CEO. She'd been there for a long period of time, and I'm sure that for her, this would be probably pretty distressing, and I empathise with that. But it goes to show that, we are held in positions of power, you are held to account for the things that you do. So unfortunately, in this instance, she's probably pushed it a bridge too far. So she's probably done wonderful things for the organisation, but in this case here, this is the undoing of her. As
Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's kind of like rule one of being the CEO of a non-governmental organisation is don't get involved in politics. So just keep that in mind.
funny. Like I'm sure a lot of organizations, and like part of what her job would be to lobby the government for funding for.
Yeah, but it's not their job to lobby you for support. That's the difference. It's like there needs to be some sort of professional distance where, yes, we have a relationship, you give me money, but also I can't really give you anything. Even if it weren't, strictly speaking, not what you're supposed to do, it also just like looks very bad. It just looks.
To be clear, she didn't break any rules. To be clear, it just didn't look very good.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's more of it's one of those things where it's like it's a norm. It's not a law necessarily, but it is a norm. This is how we normally do things. Is that these organizations that aren't meant to be they're not meant to be political. And if they are proven to be political, now granted, this doesn't really happen that often because who'd be stupid enough to do that. But if those organizations that are NGOs are proven to be explicitly political when they're not supposed to be, then they could be deregistered as a charity. So you can do it, but you're not a charity anymore. If you do that, then you're not a charity, then you're a political action committee or something, right? So,
but in this case here, she was standing on, she was meant to be standing on her own, being like, me, the person, Karen, am endorsing Josh Frydenberg.
I get it, but I don't know why that's a compelling.
Victoria.
Tell me, why is that a compelling argument to you? Do you really believe that to be the case? It's got Guide Dogs Victoria, and she mentioned Guide Dogs Victoria in the thing, and she's holding a guide dog. So, like, I feel like the connection is fairly explicit.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is the execution was not good in this instance. Whoever did the marketing for this, by the way, fire them. Fuck them.
Somewhat sloppy.
Fire them. But anyway,
so she resigned off the top of a cruise ship with a knife in her back. She resigned into an iceberg.
I'm not sure who. I mean, assuming that the organization will now look for a new CEO. But yeah, it's funny as well because, as I said, Josh Frydenberg lost his seat after all that. Like, what was it for? You know what I mean? Like, what was the, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a storm in a teacup in some ways, but it just feels sort of like pointless and sad almost now, as opposed to funny.
I'm not too upset for her. I'm sure she'll land on her feet.
Well, yes, I'm sure she's got a good network. So good luck to her in her next role.
I'm not worried about it.
Are you worried about our next favourite person, who we haven't spoken about, to be fair, for a while?
Are you talking about Salim Mehajer?
I am speaking about the one, the only Salim, however you pronounce his name. Salim
Mehajer. I was taken aback by the fact that, okay, let's start with this story and then we'll talk about the backstory. Salim Mehajer rose to prominence a few years ago as for holding a ludicrous, like, over-the-top wedding in a closed street in Sydney somewhere. And I believe there was some disagreement as to, like, whether the street could have been, like, legally closed off or not. And it was a whole to-do. And then there was, like, some friction about him being in the Auburn City Council. And
he was deputy mayor and he had a lot of, and there's investigations and court cases still ongoing with this. He had lots of conflicts of interest. Like, yes. Not one conflict of interest, several conflicts of interest with
extremely conflicted interests in being was it a property developer as well as being on the city council. I can't imagine what that might be, but yeah, and he had this big house, and then I think his wife left him. Did she leave him?
Like,
and they had this big fancy house, and then it was like on Airbnb or something. You could go and get on the house and get onto it via Airbnb for like $4,000 a night or something.
But this is the best part. Back at the height of his rise, he did a press conference with I think it was Current Affair. And Current Affair were just like, oh, this will be good. Like, Perfect. They know when it's going to be good. They're like, great, okay. And so he stood there in front of these cameras with his wife sort of
3 feet behind him. Just Juliana Margulies, just like good wifing it.
Rolling. Yeah. They were just rolling for the whole thing. Like, it was meant to be the setup before they started filming, but Current Affair were just rolling. And so like, no, you need to stand here. No, you need to get some flags in here, and we'll just sort of anyway. And it was a fucking circus. And when he started doing it,
by the way,
announced that he wanted to be Prime Minister.
Going after the top job. The media, just so you know, the media is not your friend, okay? If you're listening to this and you're thinking, no, I'll do like a press conference, the media, they're not going to put any of the fucked up parts in. They'll get it.
Story.
They'll tell my story. They want to hear my side of the story. No, they want you to be as entertaining as possible between ads for toothpaste.
Yes. They want a train wreck.
They are praying. They are praying desperately for a train wreck. And if you give it to them, they will be happy. They are not interested in telling your side of the story, right?
You don't even get paid for that train wreck either.
That's free.
You're giving it to them.
You ruined your life for free. And so, there was this very weird clip of him like delivering this speech at a lectern to no one with his wife standing like 3 feet behind him. And it was all very bizarre. Anyway, so the latest part of that story is that Salim Mehajer has been banned from starting lawsuits in New South Wales as a judge has labelled him a vexatious litigant. So basically he was suing so many different people for what they argue was, frivolous reasons. And so I didn't even know this was a thing that a judge could do, but apparently Justice Lindsay wrote a lengthy judgment published on May 27th that Mehajer had brought a series of cases in recent years which were either vexatious or had, quote, harassed, unquote, and annoyed his opponents. So it's I didn't even know that was a thing you could do.
It's not fair because I shouldn't be I should be just against the people that I've been harassing. I shouldn't have to be banned entirely from litigating.
Who knows? I might want to start a lawsuit.
Who's taking his cases? He's bankrupt. Who's doing all this?
I reckon they talk about him like when there's like, I don't know if you ever watched The Good Wife, or it's like a law firm, your Suits, where they're like, oh, it's the Johnson account. It's 10 million in billables a year. That's how they talk about Salim Mehajer, I bet. It's like, it's the Mehajer account. He's going to be suing people left and right. That's a huge account. You got to land it.
For it. He's bankrupt. He hasn't got a job. He got kicked off the council. Like I don't know. Do we know that he's still... I know he declared bankruptcy previously. Is he still in that state? I think this is what part of what all this is.
Right.
Is that he was declared bankrupt. He got kicked off the council. Pretty sure his wife ended up leaving him.
He's only 35. No, I know it makes it sound like we're describing someone who's like broken
70.
and in their 50s or something. And he's just like, he's had 20 years of hard living. The guy's 35, which means he was like my age when we first heard about him 4 years ago, he was a national figure 4 years. It feels like it's been so long since he's been in the national spotlight. And then to turn around and see this article is Mehajer, 35. And I was like, 35? I feel like I've been hearing about this prick for 10 years. How is that possible?
He's actually, here we go. I hadn't even read the article because it's that much ridiculous. I'd read like half of the article. He's actually in jail at the moment.
No, what?
Mehajer was beamed into court from Cooma Jail, where he is serving a prison time for perverting the course of justice.
Oh, I didn't know he was in jail.
We have to go back through our archives and work out
what we need.
What have we?
Is an Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like Charlie Day bird law, like a whiteboard with all the red threads connecting all of the, and we need someone to go through a Mehajer timeline as to what exactly. Remember. There's been so many stories. How is he in jail? And I didn't even know about that. Did we know about that?
I think we knew about it. It's just he's been we haven't spoken about him for a couple of years because he sort of faded into irrelevance. But every so often you can trust. I mean, this was the ABC actually, to be fair, but generally news outlets will go, "Oh yeah, he trends. People know who he is." Anyway, so he's got like 10 failed civil cases that have failed in New South Wales courts. A lot of which were in relation to some of this property development stuff that he was doing. So. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So apparently, if you ever get into trouble, just be careful with how many court cases you want to throw down to people. When people are like, I'm going to sue you out of existence. I'm going to throw so many court cases
I'll see you in court.
Yeah. Apparently you can't do that. So
I didn't know that was a thing, that they could, the legal system could go and shush.
Hush now. But, one person who I think, George, might be also a vexatious litigator is Kim Jong Un, who's the supreme leader or whatever he is of North Korea.
Mhm.
But he does have a heart, and he's a nice guy, because what he's done is he sent a letter congratulating Queen Elizabeth II as for her 70 years in power, a jubilee.
Mhm.
Then a nice letter was like, congrats, Lizzie, from one dictator to another.
From one person who aspires to be on the throne for 70 years to another, well done. You really nailed it, Queenie.
Good job.
If only I
course.
too could rule with an iron fist such as yours for so many decades, I too would be proud. Yeah, that's an odd shout out from
That's a weird shout out, right?
Kim Jong Un.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe he doesn't mind Britain. He just like really doesn't like the US, but like the UK is like rock on.
Oh, I think he's a big fan of like the whole idea of completely unjustified total rule, like authoritarianism and power that's embodied in a monarchy. I think he's very on board with that idea. He's like, a bunch of completely inept, inbred people that hold complete power for no fucking reason whatsoever. I'm on board with that. That sounds pretty good.
The thing I love about North Korea is that like we used to freak out when they did missile tests. We were like, oh, they've got another missile test. We're going to go to war, man. They're going to invade North Korea. They've done 17 this year, and I haven't even blinked. Like, people have just gone, we don't care anymore.
Whatever.
They're like the child screaming in the corner. After a while, you just sort of tune out and you go, whatever. Just scream. Just go. Just scream. Just leave them in the room, lock them in a room, and then leave. You
haven't even had kids yet out of it. This is oddly specific critique for someone who's not.
There is a story when I was little of my mother, because I was a shit of a child. She just left me in a room one day screaming for like a day, just like walked off. And then
it sounds like child abuse.
Some might call it that, but some might say it's just.
It was the 90s. It was a different time. Very affirmative parenting in that we are not around you unless you are affirmative to us.
Yeah. So that's the world this week.
Do you think Kim Jong, he's, you think he's a fan of the British monarchy in particular, or just the idea of?
The idea of monarchy.
Just the idea of monarchy, yeah.
A little bit of monarchy.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't.
Why can't it be both? Why can't he just be? Those people with the Jubilee that were like, and this is what all I've seen with the coverage of the Jubilee, by the way, it's just been like the British media going out and finding all the crazies. They're like, let's go find the most like crazy royalists that we can, and this is like some 70-year-old just like. Whose it's a hoarder, and his entire house is like monarchy memorabilia.
Yes.
And they're like, what do you think of the Jubilee? And she's like, oh, I think it's amazing. Like, I think there might be a lot of wild in Jong Un's palace where he's got some of that stuff.
A lot of wild-eyed monarchists. Yeah, I reckon he's got a Princess Diana plate.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't?
Why not?
They're probably quite valuable now, to be honest. My grandfather does have his own royal memorabilia collection. It's probably worth a fair bit. Shouldn't say that too loud. He might get robbed.
I don't think it is worth a bit. I don't think it really is, though.
You'd be surprised, because there are the crazies that are like, oh, I need that thing that I haven't got. I'll add it to my collection.
Is it just me, or does Queen Elizabeth look like she's just like knocking on heaven's door? Like she just...
I think she's obviously...
She's ready to go.
Where her health is probably not as strong as it used to be.
She's 95.
I'm happy she made it to the Jubilee. There were fears that she might not even get to this point. So, and they'd spent a lot of money on all the preparations.
Leave her alone. Leave her alone. She's 95. Just leave her alone. She doesn't want to go to any parties. Just leave her. She's an old lady.
I'll skip with Paddington Bear for the Jubilee.
I saw a clip of that. Yeah.
Everyone loves Paddington. Paddington 2 apparently is a really good movie.
Remember like the Crown in like the 50s where like, no, the regent shouldn't go on the radio. That's being too familiar. And now like smash cut to Queen Elizabeth doing a sketch with Paddington Bear. Yeah, I don't know. It's the monarchies, it has changed somewhat in recent years.
But yeah, on that note.
On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure to follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Vine, TikTok, and motherfucking Snapchat.
Snapchat?
No, we don't. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And you can follow us all down to the walls of Buckingham Palace, which have got projectors on them or something. I didn't really
think of that one. We're waving flags.
Just waving flags vociferously. North Korean flags, mind you.
North Korean flags.
God, I wish that I was like, these good these guys that I keep sending you guys clips of, the Good Liars, where they're like the guys that they're doing the kind of stuff that the Daily Show used to do, like very ballsy, kind of like going to an NRA convention and like making a speech that sounds like it's pro NRA, but if you actually listen to it, is actually kind of sarcastic and not very pro NRA at all. I wish that I had the balls to be like those guys, because then that's exactly the sort of sketch that you do. You'd be like, yeah, North Korea loves you. Like, just be there at Buckingham Palace, just waving around a North Korean flag.
Good insurance policy, I think.
Yeah.
You need to go to AMI, AMI, and
there's definitely some sort of public liability, home and contents, life insurance situation that you would need to undertake there.
Yep. Which with rising interest rates, not today.
Too much uncertainty. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.